The last two surveys, we have focused much more on mental health. This time, we also focus on the physical health aspect. And one early and easy step that the private sector can take is to allow food labeling to reflect the risks of what people are consuming. So compared to other countries in the region and globally, Indian food labeling can improve so that people can make conscious choices in what they eat, etc. And therefore, obesity is an important factor, and it will not be addressed only by government efforts. It requires citizens' consciousness and private sector cooperation as well. So when I spoke about the data cost being the lowest in the world, I said it's a mixed blessing, and here it is why. Compulsive scrolling and social comparison is linked to anxiety and depressive symptoms, and we have been covering it in the previous two economic surveys, and we continue to do so. But we are very happy to note that Andhra Pradesh government is contemplating restricting social media for children under 16, so is the Goan government, etc. But it is again a matter of policy and conscious choices to be made by citizens themselves, because exposure to screen time, sedentary lifestyle, ultra-processed food consumption increase the risk of anxiety and suicidal thoughts significantly among our adolescents and also in the people in the early working age population as well. And this is a silent scourge, and we need to fix that if we are going to achieve our long-term growth aspirations. Education and skilling is slightly more familiar term for all of us, but even here the news is encouraging. A lot of us are concerned about how we will fare in the AI era. The good news is that employers actually still value soft skills, engagement, self-efficacy, working with others, adaptability, and management skills matter a lot more than technological skills. But it's important, therefore, also to prepare our youth to look at areas which are not necessarily university education driven, but could be vocational and professional skills. In other words, we have to make vocational and technical and professional skills more fashionable and respectable than we have been doing so far. And this too is a combined initiative of the industry, the private sector, households, and the government, and not just a policy matter alone. If you look at the areas which are immune to AI diffusion, these are elder care and nursing, culinary arts, advanced tool and die specialization, early special needs education, public health outreach, environmental restoration. All of them can be pursued in areas because we have shortage of skilled personnel in these areas, and they are also resistant to the diffusion of AI in terms of future employment and income earning prospects. The last economic survey had a special chapter on AI, and this survey continues that. And the issues are with respect to the following that this chapter covers: the data center resource consumption, whether it is power or water or land, the kind of financial requirements for the large language models in the current ecosystem in the Western world, and data localization for domestic value creation, of course the macro question of mitigating the labor market impact, navigating geopolitical constraints to hardware access including chips, and importantly from a geopolitical security and dependability perspective, can we continue to depend on foreign models for use in public administration and critical sectors? Of course, the government is already making its position very clear. We are going to be looking at developing local models which are underway actually, and some of it may be rolled out in the course of the AI summit next month. But these are the various trade-offs that this chapter 14 tackles. Now, this is another issue which we have been flagging in the last few economic surveys. India is committed to net zero by 2070. And India is one of the better performing countries in terms of installation of solar and wind power in the world. At the same time, if we have to become more pervasive as a share of overall energy generation, if renewable energy were to become a significant part of the energy picture, we need to understand the ramifications. The amount of material required and the energy required to therefore generate renewable energy should not be underestimated. We should go into it with open eyes, and that is what this screen shows you. It is self-explanatory. Therefore, this chapter, like with the previous occasions, does focus on adaptation, demand management, and also this time we are happy to share with you in chapter 10 the kind of environmental regulations that have been liberalized and made easier in terms of compliance, etc., compared to the past. So that is a very positive story that is also captured in chapter 10. The special essay this time is on urbanization, apart from the sequel to AI. In Indian cities, we face a multiplicity of challenges. One is the low floor space index and floor area ratio. Mobility is a challenge because last mile connectivity is still missing, although metro rail network has expanded significantly in the last 10 to 11 years. Solid waste management and waste disposal are still important issues with growing population and growing cities, and governance is dispersed among multiple agencies. But looking at this chapter, if you read it carefully, you will understand that getting urbanization right is not just, once again, as in the case of a healthy food consumption or social media usage, is not just a matter of getting policy right. Citizens have an important role to play. We behave very differently in metro stations and we behave very differently above the surface. And why is that the case? Why is it so? Our behavior in the metro is absolutely impeccable, but not so above the ground. So, why does it happen and what can be done to make sure that there is no difference in the way citizens respond to metro rail as well as public transportation or road discipline? How is it possible and what kind of behavioral dynamics are at work here and how can the state facilitate and nurture citizens to do so? These kinds of interesting issues are explored in chapter 15, along with a discussion of some specific experiments going on in different parts of the country, which actually point the way forward for the rest of the country as well. Now, moving on to part 3, I would like to compliment a business standard for this wonderful line, which I use. India's growth story sits at the intersection of global headwinds and domestic potential. Exactly, well captured. So far, we have seen the domestic potential and priorities. We are going to now see the global headwinds. What is unfolding in the world today and why? If you look at the 5 bright pink boxes, this fund manager has predicted it in 2020 that the world will face populism, trade wars, financial repression, military conflicts, and negative real yields. And he doesn't trace this to specific personalities, he traces it to the kind of policies we adopted since the global financial crisis and the quantitative easing and ultra-low interest rate policy that was set in motion in 2008. So in other words, personalities are not the reason why the world is today looking at trade wars, military conflicts, and populism with negative real yields and financial repression to follow. These are products of choices that were made some 15 to 18 years ago, and therefore the train has already left the station with respect to these consequences, and they will be with us for the next 5 to 10 years as well. And that is something we need to take as given when we look at our own policy options and priorities. Therefore, geopolitical tensions are inevitable and they have led to decadal level highs in global economic uncertainty. The uncertainty index reached historic highs when the reciprocal tariffs were announced, but still they are much higher compared to where they were in the turn of the millennium. And reflecting that is the price of gold, which goes up by more than $100 to $200 per ounce every day. So in other words, gold is not only responding to global uncertainty, but also the question marks arising with respect to the store of value of fiat currencies around the world. So therefore, what is going to become in this era of easy money? The problem is this era of easy money, which was there from 2008 onwards, which also resulted in high inflation in 2022 and 23, has resulted in a very expensive stock market, almost reaching the highs before the tech bubble burst in March 2000. Concentration risk even more than what we saw earlier in terms of a few companies having a very high market cap, and financing of the global financial capital coming from non-banking sources rather than from banking sources which are better regulated. And if you look at the circular financing that characterizes many of the AI-related investments, you will understand that this can be a sort of a trigger to unravel the global finances. Therefore, we look at three possible scenarios for 2026 and maybe somewhere in 2027. It's very difficult to be precise about the timing. Scenario one, business as usual in 2025, continuing this year, but with less security and more fragility, and we attach a 40 to 45% probability to that. It is disorder, but managed disorder. Scenario two is